Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of a new Trekkie. My 5-year mission to search out Star Trek media, to seek out our fans and merchandise, to boldly go where no fan has gone before.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to today's video. Today it's gonna be a bit of a different in that, this one's gonna be a bit of a more informative kind of video. Honestly, I'm a little bit nervous about how this one's gonna turn out. Today we're looking about all the allegories with Star Trek, the original series, and the Cold War. So before we get into all that stuff, we have to give like a little bit of details about certain topics that'll be in this video, which is explaining the Cold War. Well, what was the Cold War? The Cold War was a long tension between the democracies of the Western world and the communist countries of Eastern Europe. The West was led by the United States, and Eastern Europe was led by the Soviet Union. These two countries became known as superpowers. And I do not mean as, like, say, like Superman and all that kind of thing. Like, you know, like giant countries with the willpower to, like, attack one another. Like that, in a way. So what was the Soviet Union? Well, it was a powerful group of communist republic countries. Countries that did not have a king or a queen, including Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, and 11 other countries that existed in Europe and Asia from 1922 to 1991. The Soviet Union was one of the most centralized regimes in the world. So another little thing that we probably should really discuss is mentioning the heightened tensions around the Cuban Missile Crisis, and as well as, what was it?
As promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
But the Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962 was a direct and dangerous confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and was the moment when the two superpowers came closest to nuclear conflict. The confrontation over the placement of nuclear missiles was in Cuba. The result, though, was the withdrawal of Soviet missiles from Cuba and the withdrawal of American missiles. So now we're going to get into one of the main points of this video. So let's get into the parts about Star Trek itself. When was it created? Well, Star Trek was created in September 8th, 1966. And some of the things that actually occurred during the time frame of the 60s were reactions of that time period, such as, like, say, the Berlin Wall being constructed in 1961, as well as other things, such as the Civil Rights Act being written in 1964. I mean, there wasn't many, like, say, an episode where suddenly Captain Kirk is talking about, like, the rights of the Klingon or something of that nature, but there were episodes, like, say, where they had, like, say, the rights to have a fair trial. See, Gene Roddenberry created Trek and saw the world unified as a place of peace that was across the galaxies. He thought of a future where equality was a huge factor. Was there ever actually any wars in Star Trek? Actually, there was. There was the World War III. What was World War III, though? It was the last of Earth's world wars that lasted from 2026 to 2053. The conflict involved nuclear catalysm as well as genocide and eco-terrorism. The post-atomic horror and the aftermath continued as late as 2079. With it being 2023 currently, we got quite a few more years before that happens. So now we've gotten that bit of detail of what were the allegories that were actually in Star Trek. Well, we have some little ideas, like the Klingons and Romulans in the original series. The Klingons are, in a way, allegories to the Russians, and the Romulans are allegories to the Soviets / North Korea. The Vulcans, being the race that were separated from the Romulans, were based around the Japanese. So, now that we've gotten to that, let's finally talk about Star Trek VI and how they were compared to the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Now the Soviets themselves may, in a limited way, be coming to understand the importance of freedom. We hear much from Moscow about a new policy of reform and openness. Some political prisoners have been released. Certain foreign news broadcasts are no longer being jammed. Some economic enterprises have been permitted to operate with greater freedom from state control.
And establish relations.
2 months ago, a Federation starship monitored an explosion on the Klingon moon Praxis. We believe it was caused by overmining and insufficient safety precautions. The moon's decimation means deadly pollution of their ozone. They will have depleted their supply of oxygen in approximately 50 Earth years.
The peace talks in Star Trek VI is like the talks to end the Cold War. However, some forces wanted to continue, similar to how those in the Communist Party wanted to continue. In this case, Gorkin, Klingon, leader who's basically here to say, hey, I want to have peace talks between our race and the Federation. He is, in a way, an allegory for Mikhail Gorbachev. He was the president and the general secretary of the Communist Party. And if you're probably wondering, you probably hear this idea a lot. The Communist Party. What was it? It was a party that seeks to realize the socio-economic goals of communism. But what is communism? What is communism? It is a physiological, social, political, and economic ideology movement whose goal is the establishment of a communist society, namely a socio-economic order structured upon the ideas of common ownership of the means of production in the absence of social classes and money. Honestly, during the time frame of the Cold War, there was always the idea of trusting one another on all that, or the common idea of the enemy. So that could be similar in the way how it is in Star Trek original series, as in Star Trek, this fourth Star Trek film, Kirk, having a bit of a hatred towards the Klingons after the death of his son David. That could be in a way geared towards another thinking how others might have, from the American point of view, might have thought of the idea of communism.
We have volunteered to rendezvous with the Klingon vessel which is bringing Chancellor Gorkon to Earth, and to escort him safely through Federation space.
Me?
Well, there are Klingons who feel the same way about the peace treaty as yourself and Admiral Cartwright. But they'll think twice about attacking the Enterprise under your command.
I have personally vouched for you in this matter, Captain.
How what actually led to the collapse of the Soviet Union? Well, there's quite a few facts for me to say. Well, there was the failed attempt of a coup against Gorbachev in 1991. It, in a way, caused the end of the Communist Party, as well as the dissolution of the USSR. The dissolution of the Soviet Union was a process of eternal disintegration within the Soviet Union, or the USSR, which resulted in the end of the country and its federal government's existence as a sovereign state, thereby resulting in its constituents, the republics gaining all sovereignty on December 26, 1991. Honestly, I gotta say, like, when it comes to the, like, looking at, like, say, how, like, the Cold War, it could be connected, or allegories in it towards the original Star Trek, you can actually kind of find quite a lot of it, especially when you go back to look at history around that time in the 1960s and all those at that time frame. Yeah, you can find a lot of it, especially in the later films, because as the, like, keep in mind the Star Trek film franchise would go on until, like, say, the 80s. So, around the time of, like, the fall of the Berlin Wall and all that, so you have a bit of connected tissues that could one be branching off with. But honestly, it is quite a bit of a fascinating bit of ideas to branch off when it comes to science fiction. But what are your thoughts when it comes to how all the allegories that the original run of Star Trek had connections with when it came to the Cold War? Put your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know. As always, thank you for watching, and I shall most definitely see you next time. See you later.